Okay, so I'd like to call to order the meeting, special meeting of the Brookline Select Board for January 13th, 2021. The time is 6:31. As noted a few times, this is a special meeting. We only have two real agenda items, which are further budget planning and then discussing the town meeting Australian ballot structure. I guess while we're waiting, hopefully, for our other two members to arrive, I'll note that we're all virtual. Everybody's online. Nobody's physically at the town office. Currently, myself, I'm online. Joseph Dutton is online. Gwen Tanza, as well as Guy Tanza, are online, and the folks from Fact TV are online. We're still waiting for other members. There's currently no members of the public in attendance. I'm realizing I will be producing minutes for this, so I'm just jotting down who's here before I forget. Okay, well, first on the agenda was to try to just spend a little bit of time finishing up the budget planning. I sent out an updated worksheet, which is dated January 8th. Hopefully you guys all have that. It was primarily plugging in all of the Fund 1 expenditures that we had talked through at the end of our last regular meeting, like for town clerk and treasurer and all of those things. The only thing remaining from my standpoint that we need to fill in, and I guess I'll just ask you guys to double check me that I haven't missed something else, but I think the only thing really remaining to discuss and to try to put numbers beside is recycling collection. Somebody else's. Hey, is that you, Bruce?
Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So we are just starting to get into a little discussion about the remaining budget stuff.
Okay.
And I was just noting that everybody has updated spreadsheets, worksheet that's dated January 8th.
Yep.
That has all the numbers plugged in from when we talked at our last meeting, and here comes Shelby as well.
Okay.
So I'll just pause one moment so I don't have to say all that over again.
Again, yeah.
Hi, Shelby.
Hey, guys.
So we're just starting to talk a little bit about the budget. And I was just noting, and I guess I'd ask that everybody sort of double check me on this or scream if somebody thinks I've missed something. But really, I plugged in all the numbers that we discussed at our last meeting, which pretty much completed numbers for all of page 1. The only hole that I see remaining on page 2 is recycling. And then everything is plugged in currently for page 3 and page 4.
Uh-huh.
Any disagreements with that? Am I missing anything that anybody notices?
No.
Okay, so recycling. So I mentioned at the very end of our last discussion that looking through the numbers for what our costs are and making some guesses on where things might go, I think without any kind of security or maintenance of the site factored in, just purely on the basis of the cost of processing, getting the recycling picked up and processing it, I think we need to probably budget $26,000 just for that. One thing I'll say is that tomorrow night I have a meeting. They've sort of reconvened the solid waste management subcommittee, which was looking into what to do with the bins that we are being loaned and a couple other towns are currently being loaned. I think there's possibly going to be a growing movement among other towns in the district to pull those bins back because they're running out of bins down at the Brattleboro facility. So, you know, like I thought might be the case this year, although fortunately hasn't been, at some point, if we do keep these bins, we're probably going to have to start to pay Triple T to rent the bin in addition to picking it up and everything else. And quite honestly, if that were to happen, 26 might not even be enough. It's hard to tell. But I think 26, given what we know now, is a reasonable estimate of what next year might be. I will say that looking at the numbers that Mike just gave me, numbers which are pretty much 6 months of the costs. I think probably we're pretty close to that. Projecting that out, it looks like at the moment we're on track to come in right at about 22,000, maybe a little bit below, maybe possibly a little above, but we're tracking to be pretty close to that this fiscal year. I expect that one way or another, the costs are going to go up next year because Triple T hasn't raised their hauling fee this year, but they tend to do it every couple of years. So I think it's reasonable to expect that the hauling fee is going to go up slightly. The processing fees were going up and at the moment have kind of held steady. If anything, the last month they went down a little bit. I think it's hard to know whether that might be the case. But our volumes have been going up. How much of that is because nobody's been going anywhere because of the pandemic and everybody's eating at home and using a lot more stuff, and how much of that will change next year, who knows? But to be safe, given what the trend seems to be, I think 26 is a reasonable number. So does anybody have any questions about that as a starting point first? Bruce, let's go start with you. Does that make sense as a starting point for the cost?
Yeah, but this is going to be a separate article, correct?
Yep. Yeah.
Yep. No, I'm all good.
Yeah. Joseph, does that make sense to you? Do you have any questions about that before we dig deeper into what we build?
Yeah. With the talk about pulling the bins back and then charging us for them, have they thrown numbers out at all, or is it just all in the dark?
No. And I don't know for sure. I have no necessarily great idea that that's going to happen, and if it does happen, that it's how soon it would happen. I just, for the last year, almost year, because of the pandemic and other things, this subcommittee that was looking into what to do about the bins literally hasn't met since last February. But there is a meeting that's been called for tomorrow night. I don't know if that's because there's more motivation among some of the members to do something about it, or if it's just because somebody thought we should finally have a meeting again because we haven't met in a year. When I've spoken to Triple T before about this situation, it's hard to know because in Triple T's defense, if this were to happen, if the bins were to be pulled back from us, which would essentially mean they'd be pulled back from Triple T also, Triple T would have to go out and buy bins, which we would then rent. They might be able to find some used ones. I think they would be good about working with us and trying to make it as little of an impact as they could, but it could easily cost us a couple $100 a month. So that ends up being a couple thousand, $2,400 a year. in an additional cost, potentially. That might not happen, but it might, which is all the more reason that I think, even though the costs at the moment, as of right today, the processing costs are holding steady, or even possibly they've dropped a little bit over what they were a couple months ago. The general trend of our cost has been going up, and I think it is reasonable to assume it will continue to go up. And if we had to rent bins, it would definitely go up. So I think upping the starting point by $4,000 a year is just the most reasonable estimate to make without artificially padding the number in an unrealistic way.
Well, that increase is only $333 a month, so that would cover the rental of the possible rental of the bins.
It would, right. It would cover that, and it would cover some other increases. Now, if a whole bunch of things increased, it would only go so far. But I mean, honestly, as it's been all along, this is largely guesswork for everyone as far as what this stuff might cost. So, Joseph, does that kind of answer your question? I just muted you guys, just so you know. Does that answer your question, Joseph?
It does, yes.
Kind of. Shelby, what do you think about the 26,000 as a starting point? Does that make sense?
No, that sounds good. Yeah, I think it makes sense to increase it because there's a lot of potential costs that could increase over the next year. And I think that'll help make it clear to people that it's not necessarily, we don't predict it's going to stay predictable, or
right.
that the cost will stay the same. So hopefully, because it was a really close call last year on whether or not it even passed. So I think it's important to make sure it's an increase from last year, especially because I think people need to see that it's trending up always.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. Gwen and Guy, what do you think about that? Does that make sense as a starting point? And remember, I've muted you, so you'll have to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
I think that's a good figure. I think it's a reasonable figure. And as Shelby related to the fact that we only missed the vote was so close by one vote last year. And with the Australian ballot, it's going to be interesting to see how many people actually vote. But $26,000 is a big number. In the event it doesn't pass, it's going to change our budget considerably.
Right. Gwen, and that, just to make sure you're echoing, that makes sense to you as well?
It does.
Okay. So here's the thing about the number. So like I mentioned last time, I think 26,000 is what should be estimated for the processing costs of, but that doesn't build in whatever we think, because I think we've talked about this a few times. I think we're all in agreement that if we do end up continuing to have that site, we're going to need to spend some money to do something more about it, at the very least to try to police / deal with trash dumping and the sort of maintenance of that site. So the question then becomes, okay, how much cost do we build in? And we also, I think we're all in agreement that we're not going to increase a different line item of the budget for trash removal for that site. That should be built into this number that's warned specifically in the article for recycling costs. And we can explain to people what that means at the informational hearing, but we need to build that into the number. I'll be honest, I don't know how much we should add on for the additional cost of maintaining the site. I know that we had some discussions before about whether we'd maybe buy a couple of game cameras and put a pole up, or do we do something much more sophisticated than that? Or do we just accept the fact that the site is going to need somebody to check on it? And do we budget in to hire somebody for an hour or two a week to clean up the site so that our town clerk isn't always the one doing it? And since I think Shelby was the one who brought this up at some point, the effective cost of that is kind of being hidden from people now because it gets factored into his time or not time as town clerk, whereas we should budget for that, and that should have a cost because it's a inconvenience and a task that only exists because we have that service. I'll let anybody barge in if they've got a great idea of a number to add to the 26 for what we might do and what that I don't think we need to come up with the plan right now. I think it's premature to do that.
Maybe.
But we kind of
No, it's
we do kind of need to think of what the low ball cost might be that we would build into this. Anybody want to barge in with some great ideas?
I don't know.
Of a
Before
number?
we used to give Fred Jutris Jr. $50 a month to police the area there, and I don't know what happened to him, but I guess he kind of peeled off or left. I'm not sure, but possibly we could find someone who's willing to police the area. Get a sticker for the Wyndham Solid Waste area, and maybe once a week load up his pickup truck or whatever's there. Right now, it's a pretty bad mess there, and also at the corner of at the corner of Grassy Brook Road where it turns by the bridge. There's a whole bunch of stuff laying out there.
Yeah.
I don't know how to overcome that, but I'm thinking, $50 a month should be enough to have even a local vendor maybe stop by once a week and pick it up. I don't know.
I was
$50 a week or a month.
$50 a month.
Joseph, what were you? Hang on a sec, guys.
I think that's actually the guy kind of has the best idea. If we can find somebody who's willing to do that on a consistent and reliable basis, I think that would be the most cost-effective way to deal with this. One thing I was thinking today, though, I saw the that little garbage truck that drives around go by, and they're a professional group that picks up trash. So we might, if we can't find someone who's willing to patrol it with their pickup truck, we might just contact them and figure out what sort of rates they might charge, or if they've done any work like this for any other towns.
And are you talking about, is that Franklin or is it somebody else that you're talking about?
I'm not 100% sure who it is.
I think that might be Franklin.
Yeah, my thought was we would just contact one of the, I don't use any of those, so I'm not sure who it is, but yeah, contact one of the professional garbage trash collectors that are currently in the town and see what they would be interested in offering.
And I think that's a good idea. Yeah, I think that's a good point. It's entirely possible we could figure something like that out, even if there wasn't someone local who wanted to do it, or maybe instead of somebody local wanted to do it. So Guy threw out the idea of $50 a month. It's a little hard to know what real trash collection, somebody like Franklin or something would want. It would depend probably in part on how much trash we're talking about, which presumably would vary from week to week and month to month. But I mean, I'll say that, I have Franklin for my trash collection, and I don't get recycling picked up from them, and they pick up every other week. So essentially twice a month. And I pay them $34 a month, I think, now. So, if we weren't getting into crazy volume of stuff, $50 a month might work, even for one of those guys.
I just I would wonder what the cost would be if, we still would need to get the trash itself or whatever has been dumped, gathered up, that's the cost for them, just literally taking 2 seconds to pause by the drive. So I would just be kind of curious what it would be if they actually had to spend kind of an unpredictable amount of time there, because they could show up one day and it's nothing, so it'd be interesting, but maybe not unreasonable. Just I would be curious to see what they would do if they had to actually clean up the trash and not just pick it up.
Well, so maybe what makes sense is, and again, we're guessing at lots of this stuff in lots of ways, but maybe in addition to an idea of $50 a month for possibly just the collection of something that's already been gathered, we might either need to build in a higher number for that, or more cost to be having somebody just gather it on the day that they're going to be coming by or whatever. So maybe, I don't know, maybe something more like 75 or $80 a month is possibly more. We're fairly quickly getting to an idea of $1,000 annually, which I don't think is a bad number to think of because honestly, that it could easily end up being more than that just for the trash collection portion of it, depending on how out of control it got. During the discussion, I'm a little inclined to think about saying $1,000 a year for the trash collection aspect of that site only. Doesn't change anything about the bit of money we have budgeted elsewhere for trash collection generally in the town. But what do people just go around? Bruce, what do you think about $1,000 for trash collection at the site as a guesstimate to add?
I think we should keep it down to about $600. $50 a month is plenty. I mean, you just stated it yourself that Franklin picks you up every 2 weeks for $34. Excuse me.
Right. But
I see that. I use that all the time, and I've seen that all the time, and I've seen how much has been left for quite some time, and I think earmarking $1,000 is too much. I think it should be cut down a shot. That's my opinion.
Well, but I will say I'll echo Shelby's point though that when there's a bunch of trash strewn around at the site, I mean, either we can continue to have just Guy and whoever else may come along pick it up, but it's a fair point that Franklin's not going to be willing to go pick up trash randomly around that site for money.
I think the person ask Guy. Ask Guy what he thinks. I defer to Guy. I mean, he's the one that's been cleaning it up. What do you think, Guy? I mean, do you think that's too much money? Am I wrong or what?
The bottom line is that there's two parts of this question. Number one, I think the $60 is a fair amount of money. And I can understand David's concern about, bumping it up to 1,000. Whether we use 1,000 or not is a question. But the other thing that makes me concerned is that if people get used to us starting to pick up their garbage there, it may manifest itself into like a garbage dump. And that's the thing that frightens me. I don't know the answer, to be honest with you. But I have been, I know, and I think Peter Meyer has, and there's probably been a number of other people who have seen the trash there, and we put it into the dumpster, and that seems to be okay. Quite honestly, I think if we could pay someone in town for a sticker for the Wyndham Solid Waste and say, hey, could you just once in a while just police the area, and if you see something laying there, maybe you can pick it up. It hasn't been so terribly bad. Once in a great while, there for whatever reason, there's a load of stuff there. This last week, I don't know what happened, but there's just so much stuff there, and it's only one or two individuals that are doing it. It's just sad.
Let me pipe in for a second.
Sure, go ahead, Bruce.
It's Mike. What I'm going to do is I'm going to email Olivia. I have a small feeling that they might be doing some of it. I would be kind of surprised because it's been mentioned to them before. But very quickly, last year towards September, they had a bunch of plastic outside the building. You know how much I've been around that building. And I actually went to Olivia and said, you don't have Randy anymore. I'd be happy to take that plastic away for you. This is last September while I have my truck on the road because I put it off for the winter. That never occurred. So whether that stuff is theirs or not, I'll find out because I'm going to email her and ask her. I was there today with Pete Noble, but didn't think of it. But I am going to email her and ask her if they're the culprits, at least for this situation.
Okay. So let's just go around quickly then, and just and so that phone here is I'm muting you guys again. So Bruce, you're as far as like money for trash collection, you are more inclined to stick with $600, let's say $50 a month as a and then we would just see what we needed to do to try to deal with that. Yeah, and that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, something along that line. Yeah.
Okay. Joseph, what do you think about a number based on our discussion?
Yeah, I'd be more comfortable with 1,000. I think there's a couple things to consider. One, I do think that this is the first time we've put this money in with the recycling cost. We're listing it as its own item to be voted on, and there's a danger that some people could start turning this into their garbage dump, and if that's the case, then I think that $600 would be not enough, and maybe hopefully this won't happen, but worst case scenario, $1,000 wouldn't be enough. So I just think that it makes sense to go with a number like 1,000.
Okay. Shelby, what do you think?
I think I'd be more comfortable at 1,000, especially because say we were able to get just the cleanup of the site, for that, we were able to do that in the $600 range. That's not the only idea we had considered for trying to mitigate some of these costs. Right. So, then there's, if we got it on the lower end, I'm not really convinced you'd get both the removal and the pickup. Unless there was just somebody super generous and basically donating their time, which yes, of course could happen. But assuming we had to pay someone fair market for their time, I'm not thinking the 600 would be enough, or it would be right at the limit, or we'd be playing with it. So I'd go 1,000 just because I think it's realistic to assume that if the town votes to keep recycling, we may also need to spend, a couple $100s to implement, some of the other, or try one of the other options we had discussed. And that gives us the flexibility to do that.
Right. And that's a very good point. And I guess what I should have said in this, I apologize for not have been a little bit more clear before. After we settled on an idea of a cost for trash collection, I was then also going to bring up, okay, do we also want to consider budgeting money for getting a couple of game cameras and putting up game cameras or whatever? But before we dive too deep into that, I guess, Gwen, are you comfortable just from a trash collection standpoint with the idea of, well, what do you feel, 600 or bump it to 1,000? I think we're a little split on that at the moment. And remember, you're muted,
Well, I think, the $1,000 is $83 a month. And, I don't think that's going to make a big difference. So if everyone's happy with $1,000 a month, I think that's it. But it may also bring a number to 27,000 that may, when we have the vote on it, possibly kill all trash removal altogether, but that's to be seen.
Gwen, what do you think about the going to 1,000 on building
That's
this
fine.
or sticking to the lower? Okay.
I'd say 1,000 because if there is anything extra, then it can be used for a game camera or something.
Right. So what do we think? We'll just go around one more time because maybe we're at a reasonable consensus if Bruce is in agreement with this. What do we think about saying $1,000? So basically that would bring what we're going to warn for the special article on recycling up to 27,000. And that would be what we anticipate as the cost for processing, but then also some amount of money for trash collection and or some kind of monitoring, depending on what we may or may not decide to do if we go down this route. Bruce, are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, I am, as long as you don't make it separate. That's in that number, the 26 to 27.
No.
Yep.
No, I mean, my intention is that the warning for the recycling will be like it's been in the past, that, do people want to appropriate up to $27,000 for recycling services? I think at the informational meeting, when we go through and discuss each of the articles, we'll explain that we've built in some amount of money potentially to do some more cleanup of the area and or monitoring of the area without, any real idea of specifics, since we won't have gotten into specifics, but that general concept. Joseph, does that make sense to you to land there?
Yeah.
Shelby, does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. And Gwen and Guy, circling back to you, that makes
Yes.
sense to you to settle in at 27?
Yep, it
Yes.
does.
Okay. All right. Then we'll go with 27. And unless anyone sees differently, I think that basically wraps up our numbers for the budget. Samara is still finalizing the FY20 numbers. I think she was hopeful that she might be done today or tomorrow. To one of our discussions last time, she has determined that the county tax for last year never got paid. She was reaching out to the county to find out about that and get another invoice. So the surplus, the anticipated surplus that she was looking at before is certainly going to come down, but it still looks like it's going to be a healthy surplus, probably over $20,000. We pretty much have to have, by next week's meeting, we'll have that, because we need to have a warning that warns the specific amounts. So hopefully she'll both get all of the books done. The auditors will be able to look at that enough to make sure those bottom line numbers are correct, so that we have figures to warn when we do that at the next meeting. We'll just go around. Gwen, do you have any other questions or concerns at the moment on the budget? Gwen, you're muted.
Gwen.
We'll come back to you. Bruce, any questions or concerns on the budget at this point?
Okay, my understanding is this. Next Wednesday, we're going to finalize the budget. Samara's got all her numbers together.
Yeah, I mean, we really have to finalize it next. We have to finalize it next week.
She's got to get it. We can't budget until we.
Yeah, I mean,
we can't.
Right.
We can't approve the numbers until we have to know where we're at as far as surplus. It's one thing to say we might have a surplus of 20,000 or 1,000. I want to know. That's me.
Right. Yeah. No, and that's fair. I'll say that she has a high degree of confidence that the number is going to be in the 20 to 30 range.
Okay,
I guess that's I can't be more specific about it than that, but I don't think there's any. She's indicated nothing that makes her think that it's going to go even below 20.
It just happened to me the other day doing my budget, checking a couple of different bank accounts. Oh, I forgot about that little deficit there, or something like that. How often does it happen to you? So I guess the point, you get the point I'm making. I just want to see a final number before we approve this.
Yep. Well, let's go around. So Joseph, any questions or concerns about the budget for now?
I don't have any questions as of now.
Okay. Shelby, any questions or concerns?
No, I'm good for right now.
Okay. Gwen, any questions or concerns on the
No.
budget? Okay. So one thing I want to clarify though, because of the fact that our scheduled last meeting of the month is next Wednesday, we have to, at next Wednesday's meeting, unless we're going to warn another special meeting for the following week, which I really don't want to do, we are going to have to vote next week on the complete town meeting warning, which has to include the amounts that we are going to present for taxable, what is going to be raised by taxes. That being said, we've gone through, I just want to make sure no one has any illusions on what our level of discussion is going to be budget-wise at the next meeting. We've gone through the entire budget and plugged in numbers. We know right now that excluding recycling, because it's going to be warned as its own article, like it always is, excluding recycling, we have numbers which increase the budget by a little over $6,000 on the operating fund, on Fund 1. We flat projected the highway. We think, we're quite confident that there's going to be a surplus in excess of $20,000, which I think we're all in agreement is going to be a number that we are going to apply to the amount of taxes that are due. So the net number from what people were taxed last year to what people are taxed this year will likely go down, even though we have in fact increased the budget by $6,000.
Dave, does that
I want people to be clear that we are not going to, without derailing an awful lot of stuff, because when we meet next week, what we're going to have before us is a fully formed warning that includes the taxable numbers, which Samara still has to work out based on these budget numbers that I will give her. But if people feel that they wanted to not increase where we've increased, unless they know whether the surplus is 25,000 or it's 22,000, that's going to be a challenging discussion to have in the context of that meeting.
Can I say something?
Yes.
Okay. I feel like I personally, and obviously I don't know where everyone else stands, but I'm personally comfortable with the increase. And in the things that we've increased, I don't think at this point, now that I've had more time to think it over, I would change my mind on wanting to increase those things, even if they result in an overall increase of the budget. And I think that's going to be where it's going to be the town's decision they have a lot of control when it comes to the recycling. And I think that's just, I'm comfortable with what we've increased, other than, you know, the recycling, which you don't have a lot of control over. So that's where I stand. I'm good with what we're at right now. I don't think I'll have much discussion after tonight.
Great. Thanks. I appreciate that, Shelby. Joseph, how do you feel?
Yeah, I kind of agree with Shelby. We've been over everything in pretty great detail. And so I don't think there's anything else really to discuss. The one thing that I would say is, and I kind of have to say now because I won't be on the board next year, but continuing to move forward, what I've seen is that we have these surpluses, and I don't see any problem with that, because a lot of these numbers that we plugged into the budget are, you know, kind of trying to be on the safe side so we don't get ourselves in a position where we're without money. But I think there's no problem with having these surpluses every year, as long as they're always put in front of the town and in a way that the town has ultimate control over that money going back. I guess I don't want to see a surplus ever being seen as money that we can just do something crazy with. I think that it should really be my intention that a surplus is always just completely refunded to the town, rather than us trying to push like, oh, we have a surplus, let's do this project this year. So that's how I feel on that.
Okay. Bruce, how do you feel about what I've just laid out as far as what level of discussion or lack thereof that we're really going to be able to have budget-wise next year or next week? And are you comfortable with the numbers we have now, irrespective of exactly where a surplus comes in?
That's a lot to unpack. Just a second. Let me just say this about the surplus. Last year we had a surplus, and if you remember correctly, I wanted to spend it. But I think the wiser heads ruled in that case, because I think in light of especially the situation now where we're getting a 9% increase in our school taxes, that we continue to return that money, whatever's left, to the town, and like you said, reducing taxation. Am I comfortable with the numbers as we've discussed them? Not really, but you know, I'm not going to get into a blow by blow now. I've got some questions about the compensation part. I'm not unhappy. I'm satisfied with the recycling part. I think we're doing that the right way, because I think we're not being disingenuous at all. We're telling the town, bam, this is what it's going to cost. This looks like what it's going to cost you forever. That's good. I like that. So I guess that's the only thing. And I think Archie did a great job. Look, the bottom line is this. I've been on 7 boards now, and we do the 4 Bs: balanced budget, buildings, and blacktop. We're trying very hard to balance this. So I guess, to not get overly long-winded about it, I guess I'm in the mood to go along with it. Got some questions about the compensation part that doesn't make me happy, but everything else, I guess I'm pretty much okay.
Then he's got a question.
Okay. Gwen, how do you feel about that? About, not specifically about Bruce's points, but about, are you comfortable with where we are on the overall budget, and without knowing specifically what the surplus is going to come in as and exactly what impact that's going to have on the taxable number until next week?
I'm comfortable with it. I thought we discussed everything fairly aggressively, so I'm comfortable with it.
Okay. All right, then that's great. I just want to make sure I wanted to make sure nobody had any misconceptions about what we're likely to be able to effectively debate next week and what we can't. Okay, so we'll move on from budget planning, and we'll move into item number 3 on our agenda, which is town meeting Australian ballot structure. So there's still nobody, no unscheduled member or member of the public has joined the meeting. So I'm assuming at this point that anybody who did have questions about anything has either reached out to somebody about them or will reach out to somebody about them. A couple things that I'll note. I've gone through a lot of the VLCT documents about both town meeting warnings in general, again, just to refresh my memory, and also Australian ballot points. A couple things that I just want to highlight at the beginning is that there are, like we've talked about, and I think, you know, Shelby, thank you for putting out the email and the note on Front Porch Forum about the positions, and Joseph, thank you for doing the sign. January 18th, which is next Monday, is the statutory deadline for people to complete the candidate consent form in order to be on our Australian ballot for any of the positions which we'll be voting on. The informational meeting, which we have to have, because our town meeting / vote will be March 1st, we have to have our informational meeting sometime between February 19th and February 28th, which is essentially the last week of February. Is that right? I'm looking at a calendar. Yes, the last full week of February. We don't have to decide this right now, but that informational meeting essentially is a select board meeting where the agenda will be, and there's some specifics about how the agenda has to be formed, but basically the agenda will be the warning with an opportunity for questions and discussion about each of the articles that will be on the ballot. What I will say and throw out there, again, we don't have to decide right now, but you know, Wednesday the 24th, which is not a week that we would normally have a select board meeting, in my mind, might be a good day to have this informational meeting. People give some thought to that final week of February and what would work, because ideally all of us really need to be part of that. We have to warn that at least 10 days prior to the meeting. So basically, you know, we have to warn it by the first meeting in February, probably. Decide it by the first meeting in February so that we can warn it and post it so everybody knows when the informational meeting is. We could decide sooner than that. I'm going to put it on the agenda for next week. Maybe we can just decide then so we all know what to plan for and we don't have it hanging out there and we know what we have to shoot for. Anybody have any questions about those dates or that part of the process?
No.
No, okay. Sorry, I'm just going to rattle off a couple of things that I wrote down as notes that I don't want to forget, just for us to have a little discussion about, or just awareness of. We neglected to put, and this is because honestly, this didn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but I guess it does now. Moderator is actually something that we do have to elect, even though we're not having a town meeting. Because though it's never really been presented this way before, the moderator is actually the town moderator for the entire year for any special town meetings we might have, such and such.
Yep.
I reached out to David Parker. He was happy to nominate himself. I think he's already contacted Guy about doing the consent form.
Yes, I have his consent.
So So, okay, so he's nominated himself for moderator because that is something that will have to be part of our warning and on our ballot. Another thing that I noticed when going through some of the points is that, Guy, maybe you were aware of this. I was not aware of this. According to VLCT, the town agent position is no longer in existence. There was
Correct.
apparently an Act 84 that was passed earlier this year that did away with the town agent. So
That's
that's no
correct.
longer something that we actually have to have warned or on our ballot. So hopefully nobody's nominated themselves for it, because we're not going to have it.
No, and I put my name there, but the bottom line is that it's not necessary. And I believe the same thing with the constables, because the town is elected to already appoint the constables. They don't have to be on the ballot either.
It would be good to clarify that point, because I wondered about that a little bit myself, but the problem is that
We seem to vote it every year.
we seem to vote it every year. So I don't know that we've ever actually had the town give the select board the right to appoint a constable, which I think possibly might be the situation where it didn't have to be voted on. Would you want to reach out to
JP, I will.
somebody at VLC, JD, or somebody to sort of, JP,
Yep.
to clarify, okay, do we, I mean, I assume at the moment that we do have to do it, and we basically just put select board as the one nomination.
Yep.
I don't know if we have to give people the ability to write in for those.
I'll get a clarification.
I guess we'll find out
from JP and VLCT.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you. So another thing that that I noticed is, again, according to VLCT, if I understood this correctly, and I think I did, we are not actually required anymore by law to have voters accept reports of any town officers. And every year we do have an article that says, shall the town accept the auditor's report? It doesn't appear that we're actually required to do that.
The
It doesn't
auditor's
mean we
report,
can't do it anyway, but sorry, go ahead.
the auditor's
ahead, Guy.
report was the reason for the town meeting. That was the original concept of one of the important parts of town meeting. So I find that a little troubling that we don't have the auditor's report as a mandatory part of the meeting. I know it's got to go in the town report, but I can get a clarification on that also.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not necessarily saying we should get rid of that article. I'm just saying according to VLCT, it doesn't look like we actually have to have it. Maybe we want to. And it doesn't change anything about the fact that the auditor's report needs to be in the town report,
Yep.
which is circulated to people. Merely I'm just honestly looking at any articles that we don't necessarily have to have.
Yep.
I think we should eliminate, because we're going to have so many articles to be voted on, and they're all going to have to be on the ballot. So that's a question mark. And again, I'm not lobbying to get rid of it.
No, I would just like to have just what we necessarily have to have.
Yeah, right. Okay, so I think from my standpoint, I've kind of somewhat conflated together what we need to figure out for the warning, which is something that we need to form and vote on next week, and how we do the ballot, which we have a little bit more time on the ballot, on producing the ballot. Let's talk just briefly about the ballot itself. So Guy got a bunch of information from the state and from VLCT and from some other towns. And thank you for doing all that, Guy, and getting all that information. That was all super helpful. And one of the things that Guy got from, that might have been from JP also, was a sample town meeting ballot for an Australian ballot, which is just a Word document, which looks, pretty straightforward as far as listing the articles and basically listing who is nominated for a position, then also having a write-in spot or multiple write-in spots if you're voting for more than one position. Although I don't know that we have that in any of our situations, that we're voting for more than one per position. We have the option of just using this and creating the ballots ourselves and Xeroxing them on the copier at the town office in advance of when people are able to start voting. Alternatively, Guy forwarded an email from some of the companies that produce ballots that some towns use, like it looks like Newfane at least and Barry, from the examples that we were sent, have an external company that will produce more professional looking, the ballots that we're used to seeing for presidential elections and primaries and stuff like that. Let's just go around and maybe we can just sort of nail down what direction we want to go. I will say first, I think we should just produce the ballots ourselves using the Word documents. It'll be a lot cheaper. It'll give us much more control of the timing of things. And I think that's a perfectly acceptable ballot for people to use. Gwen, what's your feeling about producing them ourselves versus having them done by a outside company?
I think we should produce them ourselves. We have a great copier and that would do everything that we need.
Got a good template.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
right.
that's fine.
Yep. Okay, Bruce, how do you feel?
Lousy operator. Just kidding. Just kidding, Guy. No, that'd be fine, I think. I did look at the different ballots. I thought Newfane's was quite revealing, I don't think they had anybody running against anybody. It was all individual, but that's not really what we're talking about. So, yeah, I'm good with that.
Joseph, what do you think about the ballots, production of the ballots?
Yeah, I think we should produce them ourselves.
Okay. Shelby, what do you think?
Yeah, same. I think we should just come up with our own and then make copies. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. So we're all in agreement on that. Another, I think, big thing that we need to probably nail down on the warning, and I'll say, we'll, at the next meeting, we'll have a draft of the warning. I'll produce it. It will have all of the articles listed out. We can make tweaks to it. The less tweaks, the better. It'll just make it easier for us to approve it and such. I think a big question we probably have to determine is, do we want, let's just talk through, let's kind of talk through, roughly speaking, what the articles might be. The way some towns do it, and it's actually part of a sample warning that VLCT has. As far as a warning, the warning itself is concerned, we can have things be individual line items within the ballot. Like, let's say, there's going to be one block on the ballot that is electing the town clerk. one block on the ballot that's electing the town treasurer. However, we can warn all of those within one article that simply says, you know, whatever, you're going to vote, you know, you're going to vote on the following positions, similar to what Shelby laid out in her email that was sent out to people, you know, that will say, shall the voters elect officers as required, you know, and list what the officers will be and the terms of their service, rather than having, and literally in the warning, an individual article for each position. I think we should go with the simpler route of lumping all of those positions into Article 1. Gwen, do you agree with that?
As long as there's a space for a write-in.
Well, this isn't the ballot, though. Again, this
So
is the
this
thing.
is just,
We need to separate. This is literally just the warning,
Oh, okay.
which is what we have to do next week because we have to have it posted a couple days after that. The ballot,
this-
there doesn't need to be and if you look at, you know, Newfane and some of these other places, there's a separation between what the warning, the detail that the warning has in it versus the detail that is included on the ballot.
so the
Like,
warning,
we don't have to have in the warning, sorry, one more thing. In the warning does not have to state who is running for any of the positions. It merely has to state that on March 1st by Australian ballot at the town office, you're going to vote on all of these positions.
Oh, yeah,
Right.
that's cool.
And then
Yeah.
when you show up and get your ballot, you will see all of the people who have nominated themselves or not nominated themselves for that position, for those positions.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Bruce, does that make
Yes.
sense as far as the positions are concerned and
Yes,
keeping
it
them a
does.
single article and simplifying, relatively speaking? Okay. Joseph, does
Yes,
that
it
make
does.
sense to you?
Yes.
Shelby, does that make sense to you?
Shelby.
Yeah, sorry, my finger was wet. It wouldn't let me unmute.
That's
Yeah,
okay.
that's fine. I can keep it simple.
Okay.
Shelby.
So, you know, that
Car.
effectively will, you know, if we look at our previous warning or our warning from last year, that kind of encompasses really what we used to refer to as Article 1 through 5 will all essentially be in the new article will be Article 1, which will be our moderator, clerk, treasurer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Excluding town agent that we've talked about that we don't need, and
Right.
depending on what the clarification about constable is.
Yep.
Then, assuming that we continue the way we have in the past, we would have another article, which presumably would be Article 2, which would say, shall the town accept the auditor's report? And that's what the warning is going to be. On the ballot, when we produce the ballot, we'll have a yes and no. Well, no, because this is just on the auditor's report before we get to the budget.
Oh, right, right. Okay.
Right. So then the article for the budget will again be worded relatively the same way it has been worded in the past about whether the town wants to approve that. When we get to the ballot, it will be followed by a yes or no for people to check. Okay.
Yep.
One thing that we do need to determine, because there's not a way to do this anymore if we do this by Australian ballot, is in prior years, and we all remember how fun last year's meeting was because of this, we have an article which historically says to see what dates the town will vote to collect taxes.
Oh, boy.
We are going to need to warn specific dates and say, basically, do you want to have the taxes collected on these 4 dates and define those dates? It's, of course, not realistic for us to let the whole town write in what dates they want their taxes collected.
Yep. Yes or no.
if no one has any disagreement with this, we'll go around. I'll ask everybody about this. My feeling is I will contact Samara and say to Samara, okay, tell me for the next fiscal year starting July 1st, what are the 4 dates that we want to be collecting taxes so that we can warn those as the 4 dates for people to approve or not approve. Is that a reasonable approach, Gwen? Does that make sense to you? Gwen? Everybody's great at muting themselves, less good at unmuting
except me.
themselves, but that's okay.
Yes.
Well, yeah,
that's
you're the
fine.
exception. That's true. Okay.
Yes, that's
Joseph,
fine.
Joseph, does that make sense to you to approach it that way?
I mean, I don't see why she'll just pick something that's in line with what we've done in the past, I would assume.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah.
And you know, we had all of the discussion, and what I still beat Swing up about for his amendment to the amendment about the dates, which I think makes sense. And I think what I'm going to suggest to Samara is, okay, let's look at a calendar and let's actually pick the dates that work for the treasurer and the town clerk at those periods and just have those be the dates that we ask people to approve, rather than having to deal with knowing that things get moved to a certain point. Because his premise of why he was amending that was good and made sense. But
that was it was confusing at town meeting with everyone.
It was confusing at the time, right? Exactly.
Yeah, but no, that's perfect.
Shelby, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I'm good with that. Yep.
Okay, and Bruce, closing it out, does that make sense to you to do that?
100% agree. I think
okay.
Samara calling the shots for the dates is the way to go.
Okay. So here is the more potentially complicated discussion, potentially not. Looking at our past warnings is the appropriations. So, you know, like we've talked about a little bit a meeting or two ago, appropriations are normally, we present this whole chart and we ask people to vote up or down on the entire bulk of the appropriations for things that are recurring, for things that are ones that we tend to approve every year. We have not historically warned those as separate articles. However, this year, because we're doing it by Australian ballots, an argument could be made that maybe we should warn each and every one of these as their own article. I personally, and what I'll say is, looking at some of the sample ballots that Guy got, for what it's worth, Barry does it that way, apparently. I was looking at the town of Barry has 35 articles in their on their ballot, and every expenditure is carried as its own article and is also then voted on individually. I'll just start off for myself. I think it's possibly somewhat impractical to warn each of these and have each of these voted on individually. So my feeling is, given the constraints we have or whatever, given the situation we're in, that we should still warn the recurring ones as one individual article and have an overall vote up or down on that block. We, of course, will warn any of the new ones, like we historically have, as their own article, and they will be voted on separately on a ballot. But that's my opinion of how we should do this. Gwen, what do you think about the recurring appropriations?
So what you're now in this warning, does that mean you're going to do the little chart with the listing of everything and then the total balance? Then I agree.
And we
Okay.
would
Because
somehow,
that's what they're used to.
yeah, and
Yes.
we would somehow, what I'm not clear on is,
Right.
what I'm not clear on is whether we would present that entire chart on the ballot itself also. Because I've not yet come across a ballot that, an example of a ballot that has that kind of detail on it. I'm not sure that we would. I think probably what would happen would be the ballot itself, when people go to vote, would say, shall the
They agree or
voters,
don't
well,
agree.
it would basically say the first line of the article like it normally does, which would say, shall the voters appropriate 6,000 whatever to be raised by taxes in continuing support of the following organizations. Doesn't make sense if we don't then list the organizations, but I'm not exactly sure what how the ballot would work, to be honest. But in the warning, it would be presented as it historically has been, where we would show all of the detail and show what was approved last year and what's being requested this year. Bruce, what do you think about keeping those as one
Bless you.
entity as opposed to breaking them all apart?
I like the former. The only thing I'm thinking of is that this is going to be sent out prior to the information meeting. So if anybody's got a bitch about
Bless you.
a $250 increase in appropriations, they can pick the phone up and ask us why. I don't think we have to go crazy breaking it down. If you want to say youth services, what is it, 255, and go right. But if somebody has who's that?
It's guy's phone. I'm muting him. Sorry, go ahead, Bruce.
Okay. So my point is that if this is put out in advance, which is going to be somebody at the information meeting, if they're concerned, they can call up and ask, how come we're increasing it? What was a total of $300 over the last year? And we can tell them. I think listing it, going out the amount, and let her rip. Yes.
Okay.
I'm into that approach.
Okay. Joseph, what do you think? I know when we've talked about it before, I think you, like I was at the time, were possibly interested in the idea of warning each of these as their own article. How do you feel about it now?
Yeah, I'm still very interested in listing them all individually. I think that if you have them all clumped together, there's no realistic way for someone to make an individual decision. And you can say that, oh, but that's how we've generally done it, is have them all clumped together.
Mm-hmm.
But as we all know, it's very easy to discuss things at the meeting, and that will simply be impossible with this ballot. Even though this is going to be available prior to town meeting day, correct me if I'm wrong, but if somebody calls us up on February 25th and says, why is it like this? We can answer their question, but there's no possible way for us to change anything, nor would it be reasonable to do so. Like I'm said.
Yeah, no, nothing can be changed about the structure of it as of the point that the ballot is produced.
Exactly.
Basically.
So I really see this as listing every individual article. I see as the only way to really preserve the democratic process of the town meeting. And now, obviously, there's also a huge problem with how you can list the budget. Now, it's simply not possible to list the budget, every single article as as its own piece.
Right.
But I think that it is very possible and not really unreasonable to list all of the appropriations as one simple piece. Yeah, it'll take us a couple extra minutes to count them, and it'll be a few more things here and there. But I don't think that it's prohibitively a
Mhm.
problem to list them all
Okay.
individually, and I really do think it's the only way to preserve the democratic process of this.
Okay. Shelby, what do you think about it?
Yeah, I really like the idea of listing them individually. I think that because I think whereas the budget, people are much less likely, even at town meeting, to make an amendment to the budget to change a dollar amount. It seems like with appropriations, typically from my experience, the last 2 years going, they're more engaged with it. So I think giving the voters the autonomy to individually vote just yes or no on each of the items. And also, I think it falls a little bit in line with my general approach to appropriations, where I don't love that they're grouped in a normal year. I think I would prefer items not just to get bundled in because they've been approved once, and then next thing you know, people just not just go ahead and vote for appropriations because they're generally for them all, as opposed to really approaching each one individually. So it just kind of falls in line with my overall views on how I would prefer appropriations to be looked at. And it's just counting. I mean, it's one more item to vote on, but I think it'll also save us the hassle of having people get to the ballot and suddenly question, oh crap, what were the appropriations, if we don't list it on the ballot. And if we're going to list the chart on the ballot, we're already going to take up the paper space anyway, so we might as well have a yes or no on each one.
Right. Which I think if we did have them be one thing, we wouldn't list the chart we wouldn't include the chart at the very least.
Unless it was required.
I'll say that. Well, yeah, and I don't think it would probably be required. We just have to change the wording slightly of what our article is. This is something that I would appreciate if you could check into. I believe, I don't see any reason, like with the town officers, that we can't have a single article, that we can't, in our warning, have an article that says, shall the voters appropriate X amount of money to be raised by taxes, like we normally would, and then have the chart that shows all of the detail of all of the different organizations. Have that be one article, say article, whatever, 8, whatever it would be. But then on the ballot, like, for example, I don't know if people have them handy, but the Barry town ballot has Article 1, like we would do, Article 1 to elect all necessary officers, and then they have for select board, so-and-so, so-and-so, and write in, blah, blah, blah. That we would basically have one article, warn an article that has this chart and all the detail, but then on the ballot, that article, that individual article would have beneath it, whatever we've got here, 15 or 20 different individual votes on each organization and the amount of money they've requested. We wouldn't duplicate the chart as it is here, but we would say that, essentially the first subsection of Article 8 would be, American Red Cross, $250, yes or no. Then the current $125, yes or no. And each of those would be just individual votes on the ballot, but within a singular article. Guy, does that make sense to you as a question you can ask VLCT as to whether that's legal to do? I can't imagine it isn't.
No, I think on the warning,
I've seen no example of it anywhere.
I think on the warning, if you put on the warning at the bottom of that appropriation request, each item will be voted on individually on a ballot, just to let people know that that's what you're going to do.
Okay, and that's a fair point. We could actually even do that in the description where we say, shall the voters, at the end of it, we could even say each appropriation will be voted
Individually
separately
voted on.
or something. Can you just, do you understand my question enough to just reach out to them to just double check that there's not some, I've
Yes.
gone through all of the paperwork
I
I
understand.
can find, and I don't
understand
exactly see
what you're
that
saying.
question answered.
I
Okay.
understand exactly what you're saying, and I will reach out to VLCT and also the Secretary of State's office and to make sure that we're in compliance with all laws.
So the other thing would be, I guess, it would be if if anybody has a sample ballot where this has happened, you know what I mean? It would be good to see something as well if anybody has an example.
On the template that JP submitted to you, which is a Word document, does it list anything with appropriations? Just out of curiosity, I can't remember.
No,
okay.
It doesn't.
Okay, I will
it
touch base
doesn't.
with him tomorrow.
It has some very general. It has some specific examples of like public office, but then for everything else, it just says Article 1, shall the town of blah, 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 and just has a yes or no. It doesn't have any real
I will ask him tomorrow.
It, but,
I will ask him tomorrow what language we should use for that.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you. So, so I guess what I'll say is we don't have to nail down the details of the ballot right now, but I agree with Joseph and Shelby that especially if we can warn a single article with the chart of detail like we normally do, but have each of those voted as its own line essentially on the ballot, that's the perfect situation because it gives people the ability to have a say on things individually, but it doesn't have us warning each and every one of these as their own article. Gwen, are you okay with that after this discussion? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Bruce, are you all right with that?
The warning of each article, each one individually is crazy. My only concern is if you put it all on one chart and you're selecting, okay, let's say American Cross, $250, check yes or no. Senior Solutions, so on and so on and so on. We're going to be counting all those on that night, or on that afternoon. We're going to count each and every. How many are there? It's right in front of me.
20.
10 of them? 50, 20?
19.
So 20 if you've got, let's say, 60 voters, that's a lot of counting. That's 720. Am I doing my math right?
Probably, yeah.
Whatever,
it's a lot.
Yeah,
it is. That's true.
That's true. I would just assume do it the way I said originally. But it doesn't seem like anybody's in favor of that, which is just put it all down, vote the whole thing. Or to put it all down, let the information meeting explain it, and if they don't like it, they can vote the whole thing down. But everybody else seems to be more online with doing it individually. So whatever, it doesn't really matter that much.
Because the biggest discussion.
Okay. All right. Well, like I say, we're not deciding that in stone yet until we get to, because we will ultimately
next week
vote. We'll vote the warning next week, but the warning will almost certainly still be the chart and a single article. How that translates into the ballot, we probably won't really get into that until the first meeting in February.
Okay.
But we can hash that out at that point. So just to continue through the general stuff about the warnings, then I assume everybody's in agreement still, like we always have, that each of the new appropriations will be warned as their own article, as we always have done. We'll have an article about whether the town has the treasurer collect the taxes, as we always have done. We'll have an article on, sorry. Say something. Okay. We'll have an article on recycling. we don't have, as far as I'm aware, we don't have any school related anything. So unless I'm missing something, the recycling will probably be the last article in the warning, because there obviously won't be an article about transacting any other business because there's no mechanism to transact any business.
I think the recycling article will have to come before we approve the budget.
Why?
It hasn't ever before.
Oh,
No,
okay.
it hasn't.
Okay.
No, we almost always approve the budget and then separately we end up voting on the recycling.
Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's what
So
happened last year.
I don't think there's any reason to change that order. Okay, so that's basically the structure of the warning. So Guy, on the positions at this point, there were a couple positions that you noted so far you haven't had anyone nominate themselves for, right?
I haven't heard from the auditor. I haven't heard from the cemetery commissioner, though we did reach out to Howard Osgood. The listers were in trouble there. And we have the 2-year term, someone submitted a consent form. The 3-year term, someone submitted a consent form. The 1-year term is still open. And the town grand juror, which I think is David Parker. I'm not sure if he realized that he was the town juror, so I'll reach out to him. But
Yeah,
other
if you
than
could
that,
reach
we're
out
in
to him,
good
I'm
shape,
sure
I
he
think.
meant to. Shelby, do you want to do another year of select board?
Don't pressure me right now, man.
Well, sorry, I don't want to. What with the bells of Guy's phone going off, and that wasn't helping you.
I believe I have days left to decide.
You do. You have 5 days.
Yeah, under
No,
a week,
no pressure.
under a week,
No pressure.
but more than a
No
day.
pressure.
You know, so
Yep.
I'm really
yeah.
good at filling
That's
out
loads
forms,
of time.
so I could definitely I can whip it off at the last minute if I need to. But no, I've got a lot going on. Well, I guess not more going on than I had going into this year, but that same level of a lot going on. So I'm making sure it'll be a good decision to run again. That's all.
Okay. That's fair. Totally fair. So cemetery, you were saying, Guy, and you're muted, but you can take yourself off mute. So cemetery commissioner, you reached out to Howard Osgood?
Yes, I did. And
Okay.
we called him up, left the voicemail.
No,
And-
I messaged him
and we messaged him. So hopefully we'll hear from him soon.
because it's
Okay.
his position that's available.
Oh, okay. So auditors, who is the person whose term is up? I'm looking
On
at
the cemetery
book, sorry.
commission? On the cemetery
No, on the
commission
auditors.
is Howard.
Auditors.
Oh,
The auditors,
Auditors,
I
no,
believe, is
Kendra.
Heidi or Kim. I can't remember.
Oh, no, yeah,
Um,
Heidi, sorry.
I believe
Heidi.
it's Heidi, though. And I will speak to her and see if she will. She seemed to be interested last time, but I don't know. I don't want to speak for her. But I will reach out to her and say, Heidi, because a lot of people don't realize that we're doing the Australian ballot as much as we tried to get the
Right.
message out there. But
Yeah.
I think we literally have to go out there and talk to them.
Okay. If you could do that, that would be great.
I will.
It would be one less thing to have to, because obviously anything that's open after this, well, people could write in. The thing I'll note, so Guy, how many registered voters do we have in town?
423, I believe.
423. So double check me on this, but so anyone who gets a write-in, well, you'd have to have essentially 5 write-in votes in order for it to be valid, because I
Right.
think the threshold is 1%.
Yes.
So, we're I don't know, potentially we would have write-ins on some of these things, but it would have to be more than 1% in order for it to be
That's
valid.
correct.
But of course, the person still has to be willing to do it, even if somebody writes them in. So
Right.
the less of that we have to deal with or appoint, trying to find people to appoint after this is all over, the better. So if you're able to get Heidi to
Yep. I will
re-up, that
talk
would
to
be
her
good.
next week.
And you'll
I know
start
the
talking
lister
more then.
situation is a more complicated one, but we'll just have to figure out what we can figure out on that.
Which one?
Samara,
Which
I
one was
think, mentioned there was somebody she thought might be interested in getting involved with the listers, but
What
I'm
office
not
was
sure.
that, David? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
No, Samara had said something to me the other day about somebody that she thought would potentially be interested in being a lister, but nothing may have come of it. I don't know.
Yep. I spoke to one person, and they weren't too happy about it. But okay, we have to do what we have to do, and
yeah, we'll figure it out. We're in better
That's gonna
shape
get
than,
worse.
quite frankly, I thought we would be. So that's good.
absolutely.
Okay. Anything else on? I don't know. Maybe we've gone through most of what we need to go through for now on the warning and or the ballot.
Yep.
I don't know that I have anything else that I'm thinking of that we need to talk about right now on either of these things. Gwen or Guy, are there things about the warning or the ballot right now that you think we still need to talk about?
No, I think in light of the coronavirus situation, that we have to keep it simple, but yet we have to give the voters the opportunity to express their concerns and thinking. The information meeting will give them that opportunity. And the Australian ballot is an up and down vote, and that's just the way it is. There is nothing we can do about that.
Yeah, right. Guy, so have you heard anything about any legislative changes, or I to be honest, I really haven't been following.
No, there
much,
was some talk about some legislative movement, but as of they went into session, I believe the 6th of January, and I haven't heard anything. But I'm hoping that there may be some movement for some things to help us. But the bottom line is, to be honest with you, I think the town is well prepared, and I think the town is doing the best job they can, given the facts that we have to deal with. And this year will be unique and different, and we will learn from it. But I think we're doing everything legally.
Okay. Bruce, any last thoughts from you on the warning or ballot before we?
You had a senior moment. I'm entitled. I missed the point that you and Guy were talking about the amount of listers. How many are? There's 2 that are going, right?
No, we have, Bruce, we have 3 listers. The only one that's up this time is Don Goki. He has already submitted his resignation. We have 2 other listers, Sheila Goki and Marcia Oman. They've expressed the desire to resign. So at this point, we don't have any listers at this point. But again, they may change their mind. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, they have not actually resigned. So we. Yeah.
I was in the office last night, and I was going through the select board, whatever that little thing that holds stuff, because I had my check in there, and they had a letter that was a resignation, if I read it properly. From
that was for Goki.
I don't know. That might have been for Sheila.
That was for Marcia and Sheila.
Oh,
okay.
Was it? Ooh.
Well, again, like I say, and then the thing about that, and I'll be honest with you, I'm going to name names. I spoke with Stan Noga, and asked him, I reached out to him saying, Stan, we're in a little dire straits here. Would you be interested in? He expressed the fact that he's just retired and he just needs to have a little breathing space at this point. So I don't know. The other issue is that we haven't had an audit since 2007. That's 13 years. Meanwhile, our CLA is in fairly good shape. So I don't know. I don't know how that's going to play out, to be honest with you, but it's something that we have to think about.
And work separately.
So, okay, so to clarify, this is news to me. Have all of our listers now resigned? Formally?
If Joseph is telling me the truth, I mean, I didn't mean that, Joseph, excuse me. If Joseph is, have you seen the resignations, Joseph?
Yes, yeah, I read, it was a note, it was one note that had
Sheila?
short blurb with Sheila and Marcia's resignation and their signatures.
All right, and Donna's already resigned.
Oh, boy.
Okay, so
Oh, boy.
basically, did they give you a date of resignation?
I don't recall from.
Okay.
I think it was up until after the town meeting. But again,
Okay.
you'll see the note.
Okay. Meanwhile, by the same token, I will reach out to the district supervisor for the listers and see what options the town has.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Okay, so then just to circle back then,
Only one.
as I'm using this draft warning for next time, we're actually filling 3 lister positions now.
No, we only have one lister whose 3-year term is open.
Well,
That's
but
the only one we
but
have.
if
But
if
the
our
other
other two,
will be resigning, so you can appoint someone at the town when you have the organizational meeting.
But he thinks they resigned as of town meeting day.
right,
Which
So
means their
She'll
positions would be
act until
which
vacant,
means their
First.
positions are vacant, right?
just like anyone's term expiring.
Yeah,
Like it's ending
So
on,
that
so we
means we have
should
3.
be able to recruit people to run for the position.
Oh,
so that
boy.
means we have 3.
Not going to be easy.
Well, in any
Especially-
event, people need to be voting for 3 listers, whether we
Right.
get 3 listers or not,
Right.
to whether we get any to nominate themselves or anybody to write in is another question. But as far as the warning is concerned, we now know that we have effectively 2 more.
All right, so
Well,
2 will,
when you get the letter, Guy, do me a favor and just scan the letter and send it to me.
sure.
so I can
And
see
then
it.
the bottom line is that we will have to elect
But yeah,
2 to fill out the existing terms and 1 for a 3-year
Right.
term.
Certainly.
Oh,
Right,
'cause
exactly.
Marcia's was for 5 years.
right.
Joseph,
Well, Marcia's, because Marcia just got reelected last year, so she still has, we'll have to, we'll have to sort
Yep,
out what's remaining on each of their terms. But yeah, if you can, when you see the letter, if you can scan it and
yep, I'd be more than
send it
happy to
around to
send it
all of
to you.
us, just so we,
I'll scan
we'll
it and
figure it
send
out.
it to you.
okay, cool.
Okay.
Sorry. So Joseph, anything else about the ballot or warning at the moment?
Yeah, the one thing I would agree that the warning, it would be good to know if the warning could be, a little different. It could be one article in instance of the appropriations and then have them all voted on and everything. But yeah, I'm kind of in agreement with everything that you spoke about in terms of that, and we'll just see what happens. But no, I don't really have any outstanding questions.
Okay. Shelby, how about you?
Yeah, I'm good with everything for right now. Everything's gone over. I might have no questions in my brain at the moment.
Okay. All right, then I'd make a motion that we adjourn. Is there a second?
Second it.
Seconded by Bruce. Everybody comfortable with that? Anything else anybody wants to talk about? Hearing none, all those in favor of adjourning signify by saying aye.
I
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, then we are adjourned at 8:10 p.m.